I think SSSS Gridman is an amazing trigger show that redeemed the less than desirable entirety that became of the latter half of a certain other trigger show. Although I'd like Trigger to relax on making mecha action shows, because yes, we get it, you love Gurren Lagann and you love action shows. I think Trigger as a studio would be pretty dope if they made something that's less actiony. Them doing a show focused on character drama with the Trigger-like antics would be dope and interesting to see, which is kind of how Gridman is shaping up to be somehow. And I want to talk about that. Gridman isn't just this weird, goofy mecha show, but puts out a good case for just being well written with its dynamic tone, character designs, and charm. Sticking with Gridman for the entirety of the 10 episodes that are currently out, one of the biggest things for me has to be the tonal shift that occurred. Tonal shifts can be a tough thing to tackle, and many shows definitely do deal with tonal differences in either narrative arcs or just individual episodes. One way to enact a tonal shift that Gridman does well is a gradual shift. Gridman starts with a strong tonal push to be this kind of light action-packed thriller. This persists throughout much of every episode, with the anticipation of a new fight always looming and of course ending on this huge action set piece. It follows a monster of the week formula reminiscent of what the show is paying homage to, but underneath that is a bubbling, underlying, darker tone. Akane turns from this evil villain whose seemingly only motivation to kill Gridman is sheer boredom. To a person with depth. She has a lack of control over what she wants, with Gridman constantly destroying her kaijus and Auntie's lack of actually being able to beat them. It at first seems that her frustration and aggression stems mainly from the fact that she's losing. She comes off as a spoiled brat, given this immense power, and once that power is shown to fail over and over again, she throws a tantrum. But she is a lot more interesting than that, and it's shown early on from the way her room is laid out, her mannerisms, and even from her character design of having broken glasses and her broken screen, implying something much deeper than what she seems. Later on, we learn that she holds a great deal of loneliness that stems from her lack of understanding of why the road she's literally made because she's a god is slipping away from her, and how isolated she feels having to literally make friends. Episode 9 with the dream sequence serves as a huge payoff to this growing character depth, and it really fits. The atmosphere given from the action and the excitement of the tone had always worked alone, but now they're working in tandem. The action has more weight towards the tone, and the build-up towards the action is given new context, and the content of the story being able to weave between having huge choreographed mech fights and just being exciting without them is really much more potent now than it was before. With this, the interesting aspects of the show, and where I think the show really shines, can actually come alive, and the show really starts picking up. But that isn't to discount the former half altogether. Even if you haven't seen a single episode of the show, I'm sure that two girls have made their rounds across your Twitter feed, Reddit, and basically at the time all of art websites like Pixiv. The hypes died down a little, but at its prime, everyone was talking about Rika and Akane, the show's two main female characters. They were in the eyes of every fic-fi enthusiast mainly because of their character design. And Trigger, across the board, has always been consistently great in character designs. But for me, it wasn't just how they looked. Each character stood out with their own defined roles, and their interactions with one another felt genuine. They had organic chemistry, or at least it felt very natural and fun to watch, which is why they carried the show for me. Not to mention that they embodied the somber atmosphere that the show's tone was underpinning. It would have been a shame if they didn't in some ways develop them as actual characters, adding small bits of depth to who they are and what they represent, but they did. And with such a small and collected cast this time, minus the weird side cast that I'm really fine not getting any characterization on, I could really focus on who the show wanted me to focus on, and once they dropped the tonal shift, it made it all the more better to see how the characters react and grew along with that shift. Rivka, for example, becomes more reliable and more assertive in her role in this team, especially during episode 5 when she was the one who managed to save everyone at the end of the day. Before this, she really didn't do much, and she was nonchalant about the whole affair, really just watching from the sidelines. But this inclusion of her being able to do something and help pays off later on once she feels shafted, that her opinion isn't being listened to, and when Yuta confronts her. This confrontation even ends up being a moment of revelation for the whole team, helping them all grow collectively with this conflict to develop from. And let's not forget about Auntie, who began as a villain, but slowly became more human-like and sympathetic. He, just like the tone, was gradually shifted into the show, recurring as a villain, but also having his own side arc with Rika, and his payoff hooked me in again, and got me excited, despite being pretty obvious what he would do. But because we were shown these tidbits, and we were given so many smaller moments with Auntie, we could grasp that he was going to be important and play a bigger role, and things made sense once he made the switch. It wasn't a sudden jarring, oh, I'm now going to help you guys fight. It was well earned with how we were given his characterization. Beyond these 2 points of extremely well done tonal and character focus is what I think probably the most important aspect of Gridman, and of any show really, which is charm. Charm as a concept in shows, to me, is what signifies the appeal of that show. It can be the charm of quirky characters in quirky situations, or in how badass and cool its setting is. Charm is that one defining point of a show that you can give in an elevator pitch. There's a lot of ways that a show can also feel like its charm falls flat, especially when the charming bits either feel redundant or cliche, or tries way too hard to carry the rest of the show. But for me, Gridman's charm has always been a great supporting element in the show. Its charm for me falls in the characters, but also in the action that really solidifies how crazy and out there Gridman's story is. This is a fun, wacky show that really should not be thought of deeply. And yet moving from episode to episode, from huge action set piece to huge action set piece, is an underlying and deeper story to be found. This show feels genuine in how it is, which might be a part in the fact that, again, it's essentially an homage, which is extremely evident from the first episode. But apart from that, I think why I'm having so much fun watching the show, even if I still have a distaste for some of the early choreography, is that it at times doesn't take itself too seriously. It begins as this wacky show with a cliche premise of amnesia, and it nods to what's hidden beneath it and wears its colors on its sleeve, not trying to be something that it isn't. It's not trying to be this extremely deep dive into the human psyche of Akane, it just happens to fall into place that it is. But despite that, again, at the end of the day, how they deal with these problems is how they've always dealt with these problems, by fighting and beating up some giant monster like they've shown in the first episode. So even as they shift gears, we're still just gonna get really wacky and fun action sequences. SSSS Gridman is a slow burn, and it definitely isn't going to be extremely appealing at first if you don't give it a chance. It might just very well seem like an extremely goofy and weird show that doesn't go anywhere. Except it does, and it does so beautifully. This is a charming, surprisingly intriguing show that is also just a blast to watch and be excited about. And it does so while also just being the type of weird trigger show that we all love. And that's why I think it's a really amazing show and why I really respect and enjoy watching it so much.